Today marked a significant holiday for my little sister and our entire family, including our acquaintances and friends. A birthday. Ellie would have turned 9 today, and our grandmother tried her best to shower her with all her attention, ignoring me. In fact, everyone surrounded Ellie with gifts, affection, and love, and I was left standing aside as if I didn't exist. Well, it's a pretty standard situation considering I'm the older one in the family, and she's like a little princess who needs care and attention. I think everyone has experienced something similar at some point. So, there's nothing particularly surprising about it. Besides, I'm used to it because Ellie won't always be little. There will come a time when she grows up and becomes a big girl, and then the kind of parental supervision and extensive care she has now will no longer be necessary. Preparations for the upcoming holiday celebration were in full swing. Mom, Grandma, and Great Aunt Greta were noisily and cheerfully cooking and baking all sorts of delicious treats and baked goods in the kitchen. My uncle and Ellie's uncle, Sam Carton, along with our stepfather, were decorating the backyard, installing a glass sculpture of my little sister. Mom also invited all the neighbors, friends, and acquaintances. They eagerly helped each other and congratulated Ellie along the way. I wasn't angry or offended by this, but it was kind of annoying because while we were busy and I was actually helping decorate the house with my sister, we were constantly being distracted by congratulations, which was terribly out of place and really distracting. I told Ellie that if she wanted to finish her chores quickly and be free for the congratulations, she should focus on work first and then have as much fun as she wanted. She scowled at me and called me a fool, then reluctantly began making decorations. Besides, my father was supposed to come visit us today. Ellie hadn't remembered him since she was little, but I did. He divorced my mother when my little sister was only a year old. My mother didn't really like to remember or talk about him, considering his leaving the family a betrayal. But I still loved him like a father, and as I walked past the door with boxes of decorations, I expected to hear a knock, and upon opening the door, see him standing there. That didn't happen. Evening had come. Family, neighbors, relatives, and friends were happily celebrating together and celebrating with Ellie. I was sitting alone at the table, eating a slice of cake, when the doorbell didn't ring. I immediately ran to the door, but when I opened it, all I saw was a box taped shut. It was a package with a gift inside for Ellie. Dad must have mailed it. As always, I thought to myself. I forgot to mention that Dad never came to our birthdays. He only sent gifts or letters of congratulations. And this time, he apparently decided to make do with just that. I went to Ellie's room with a disgruntled expression to give her the package. Meanwhile, she was loudly and boisterously playing with her friends her own age, oblivious to me and my knocks on the door. Only when I kicked the door open did she hear me and open it. Ellie looked at me with irritated eyes as if I'd ruined her life. I handed her the box, telling her it was a gift from Dad. She reluctantly took it from my hands and slammed the door. As if to teach her a lesson, I swung my leg again and gave the door a good, hard kick. The girls, not expecting such a loud impact, were startled and screamed, while I quickly went downstairs. House. The next day, I woke up in my bed as usual, rubbing my eyes and seeing some scraps of cardboard in my room. I realized they were the remains of Dad's package, but I was infuriated that they were in my room. Angrily gathering up all the trash, I headed to Ellie's room to find out what had happened. But as I approached her bedroom, I suddenly heard Ellie talking to someone. Ignoring this, I burst into her room and pounced on her with accusations. Ellie, meanwhile, sat quietly at a small toy table, pretending to have tea. She seemed oblivious to my screams. But as I was about to leave, realizing I was unlikely to get an answer, my gaze accidentally fell on the chair next to me across the table. A small child's doll, dating back to the 17th century, sat on the chair. The doll had small, black, pitch-black eyes. What made them stand out was their very realistic appearance, as if they were real and alive. It seemed they were even looking at me. The doll was also dressed in a white, lace-trimmed sarafan dress. On its feet were small, bright red shoes. I stood silently and examined it, not coming any closer. My sister startled me with her voice, waking me up. She told me it wasn't her fault that the remains of the box ended up in my room. According to her, it was Isabel. "Who's Isabel?" I asked my sister. Ellie replied that it was her new friend, a gift from her dad. My sister, smiling, pointed at the doll. "It's Todd," Ellie said happily, laughing wickedly. I was struck by the misunderstanding, as if I couldn't understand something, but chalking it up to childish imagination and relying on the fact that Ellie was still a child, I let go of my anger and asked my sister not to come into my room again. She nodded obediently, without saying a word, and so, as I was leaving my sister's bedroom, I stopped and asked her who she'd been talking to before I barged in. Ellie chuckled and again pointed at the doll, a smile on her face. I looked at the doll with disbelief, then retreated into silence, closing the door to my sister's room behind me. That same day, closer to dinner, we gathered at the table as usual. Everyone ate silently, and Ellie played with her new toy, feeding it too. Mom found this amusing, but I didn't. Something was off about this doll, something that made me uneasy. Perhaps I was simply unaccustomed to such things, hence the reaction. So the days went by. Ellie spent more and more time with her doll, sometimes ignoring Mom and me. Any attempts to play with her were ignored and ignored. Soon I began to notice something strange in my sister's behavior. She stopped hanging out with her friends, saw them less often, and attended school less often. Mom didn't like this, and sometimes got angry. But even in the face of her mother's scolding, Ellie remained oblivious. She simply sat hugging the doll, brushing its hair or playing with its hands. After some time, Ellie's behavior changed completely for the worse. She stopped going outside. She didn't answer calls from friends and family when they simply wanted to talk to her. She didn't talk to us and ignored any words we said to her or even to anyone. She often locked herself in her room and avoided any light. She also rarely ate. The only thing Ellie did consistently was carry the doll with her. Her sister held the doll in her arms 24/7. Her once joyful, childish face, filled with carefree days, turned gray and pale, revealing only sadness and despondency. Sometimes, when you saw her, you couldn't recognize her. One day, something happened that would have been the end of this story. But no. Coming into the kitchen that morning, I greeted my mom as always and wished her good morning, which she reciprocated. While putting fruit into a small blender, I began to notice something was wrong. The small propeller blades were seriously warped inside. Digging around in the blender and barely managing to extract the thing that had caused the blades to warp, I was first shocked, then horrified. What I initially took for some unblended ground meat with a bone in it turned out to be nothing at all. It was a human finger, and a small one at that, like a child's. I immediately showed my find to my mom, and together we called Ellie into the kitchen. She slowly, with a big smile on her face and dragging a doll by the hand down the steps, came down to us. Mom and I were stunned. Blood trickled down her right hand, all over her fingers, from the severed finger to the floor. Ellie seemed oblivious to the pain. We ran to her in shock, and Mom quickly bandaged her hand with a towel. That same day we asked her why Ellie had done it, to which she replied, "It was Isabel's request." Apparently, no similar incidents occurred from that point on. To top it all off, my little sister began to behave normally. She started going to school, eating, and meeting her friends outside. But one night, something inexplicable happened. I was sitting in my chair, playing Block Strike on my phone. Suddenly, I heard a strange, muffled sound, like something had fallen somewhere. I stood up and walked down the hallway to the stairs. It was dark. The moonlight reflected off the glass of the pictures hanging in the hallway. I slowly wandered through the house, searching for the source of the noise, peering into each empty room. After peering into Mom's, I walked up to her and kissed her forehead, running my hand through her hair. Leaving her room, I headed for mine, but then I heard the creaking sound of a door opening. It opened slowly and deliberately. This alarmed me, and I peered into the depths of the hallway. It was my sister's bedroom. A rubber ball suddenly leaped out of it and, like a bouncy ball, slowly bounced to the wall, stopping when it hit the wall. I began to approach Ellie's room. I don't know why, but my heart rate increased. I began breathing faster, and it felt like every step was labored. I cautiously approached the ball at first, but it suddenly quickly rolled back on its own and flew back into my sister's room. The door slammed shut just as quickly as the ball. I froze and fell into a stupor. Unable to bear it any longer, I was suddenly pushed hard to the floor by an invisible force, like a strong gust of wind. I fell backwards and hit the back of my head painfully, causing me to lose consciousness. Somewhere in the distance I began to hear children's laughter, but soon I passed out completely. I woke up in some kind of basement. It was extremely damp, practically invisible due to the darkness, and there was a terrible stench of mold, rust, and rot. I lay on the floor, unable to move. I tried every way I could to make any movement, but all my attempts were in vain. Suddenly, I heard a soft, singing sound. There were no words, just someone humming an unknown, soothing melody. I tried to see who it was, but I couldn't even lift my head. I was paralyzed. Meanwhile, the melody grew louder and louder. I began to realize it was approaching me with leisurely steps as I heard the sound of bare feet on the wet floor. They were slow, but insistent. My heart began to pound in fear, and my breathing slowed. I began to twitch, panic, and tried to scream, to no avail. The footsteps and singing suddenly stopped, and for a moment I felt better, until I saw the childish face of a girl with black eyes, her face like porcelain, and she wasn't alone. Soon, other children's faces began to emerge from the darkness of the basement. Laughter and voices began to ring out. One after another, they emerged from the darkness and stood there looking at me. I wanted to think I was dreaming, but then I heard Ellie's voice. "Well, brother, now do you understand that I wasn't lying to you?" she asked me from somewhere in the darkness. She started laughing, and then the other children did too. Slowly, I began to make out her outline in the darkness. She emerged from the middle of the basement, her form like her own, unrecognizable. She looked just like that silly doll, Isabel. Ellie had black eyes and looked at me with a wide smile, then said, "You have nothing to be afraid of, Toady. They're all my friends. They're my family. Mom's here too, and she's joined us." Ellie pointed to the children who stepped aside, revealing Mom's silhouette. Only it wasn't our mom anymore. "There's room for you here too. Be brave, Toady. We're going to have so much fun. We all want to play." A terrible, loud, childish laugh rang out.